In the cold hallway of a nursing home at midnight, an exhausted night shift nurse suddenly spotted a frail old woman sitting motionless by the window, longing for her son she hadn't seen in years. Unable to bear it, she quietly helped the lady write a final letter to her son. But just days later, the powerful son in an expensive suit appeared unexpectedly, and instead of thanks he put the nurse at risk of losing her job. What no one expected was that very letter was about to reverse everyone's fate. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow something even more special awaits you. The hallway of Oak Ridge Care Home was silent at 3:20 in the morning, the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums and made every small sound feel enormous. Lena Morris pushed her medication cart slowly past room 410, then 411, her white sneakers barely making a sound against the worn linoleum. The overnight shift meant navigating these corridors in near darkness, just the dim emergency lights casting everything in shades of gray and amber. It was January in Michigan. Outside, snow piled against the windows, and even inside the building, the cold seemed to seep through the walls. Lena pulled her cardigan tighter around her scrubs and kept moving. She'd been working nights for 3 months now, ever since her younger brother Devin lost his job at the automotive plant. Someone had to keep their lights on, keep food in the fridge, keep them from losing the one-bedroom apartment they shared on the east side of town. She was 27 years old, and most nights she felt twice that. Room 412 had its light on. Lena stopped, frowning. At this hour, most residents were deep asleep, their rooms dark and quiet except for the occasional snore or the hum of a medical device. A light on at 3 in the morning usually meant pain, confusion, or fear. She knocked softly, 2 gentle taps, and pushed the door open. Ruth Callahan sat in the chair by the window, her small frame making barely an impression in the cushioned seat. The old woman's white hair was thin as cotton candy, and her hands were folded in her lap, trembling slightly. She wasn't looking at Lena. She was staring out the window at the parking lot 3 floors below, watching snow fall through the halo of a streetlight. Mrs. Callahan. Lena stepped inside, leaving her medication cart in the hallway. "You okay, honey? It's awfully late to be awake." Ruth turned slowly, and her face shifted into that gentle apologetic smile she always wore, like she was sorry for existing, sorry for taking up space. "Oh, sweetheart, I didn't mean to worry you." "You didn't worry me." Lena moved closer, her nurse's eyes automatically checking Ruth's color, her breathing, the way she held herself. "Just checking on you. Can't sleep?" "No, dear, my mind just—" Ruth's voice was soft, barely more than a whisper. "It wanders at night. Old lady problems." Lena pulled the footstool over and sat down, even though she had 11 more rooms to check before dawn. Something about Ruth always made her slow down, made her stop rushing. Maybe it was the loneliness that seemed to radiate from the old woman like a cold from a window. Maybe it was the way Ruth always looked so grateful when anyone paid her the smallest bit of attention. "Anything I can help with?" Lena asked. "Pain? Need some water? Want me to adjust your pillows?" Ruth looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered across her face. Hope, maybe. Or the fear of hoping for something she'd learned not to expect. "Did any mail come for me today?" Ruth's voice was even quieter now. "Any letters?" It was the same question Ruth asked every single morning, when Lena checked on her before shift change. Every single morning for the past 2 weeks. "Not yet, Mrs. Callahan," Lena said gently. "But if something comes, you know I'll bring it straight to you." Ruth nodded, that same patient, resigned nod, like she'd expected that answer, but had to ask anyway, just in case. "That's all right, dear. That's all right. If anything does come, would you read it to me? My eyes aren't what they used to be anymore." Lena glanced at the nightstand. Ruth's reading glasses sat right there next to the lamp, and a small framed photograph of a young boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera. "Of course I will," Lena said. "You're such a good girl." Ruth reached out with one trembling hand and patted Lena's arm. Her palm was papery and warm. "Your mama raised you right." Lena smiled, even though talking about her mother always felt like pressing on a bruise that never quite healed. Mama had been gone for 6 years now. Ovarian cancer, the kind that moved fast and left no time for goodbyes. "Come on," Lena said, standing and offering her hands. Let's get you back to bed. You need rest. Ruth let herself be helped up, moving slowly, one careful shuffling step at a time. Lena supported most of her weight as they crossed the few feet to the bed. That's when Lena saw them, tucked under Ruth's pillow, barely visible but unmistakable, a stack of envelopes, maybe 10 or 12 of them, white with stamps already affixed, and beside them folded papers, creased and recreased so many times the edges looked fuzzy and worn. Ruth saw where Lena was looking and went very still, her hand moving instinctively to cover the papers. Mrs. Callahan. Lena kept her voice careful, non-judgmental. Are those letters? They're nothing, sweetheart. Ruth's hand pressed down protectively over the stack. Just some things I've been working on. Nothing important. Lena didn't push. She'd learned in 3 months of overnight shifts that people in nursing homes had so little privacy, so little that was truly theirs. You didn't take that away from them, not over something harmless like letters. She helped Ruth settle into bed, pulled the thin blanket up over her narrow shoulders, made sure the call button was within reach. You get some sleep now, okay? Lena said, I'll check on you again before my shift ends. Wait. Ruth's voice stopped her just as she reached the door. If I needed help with something. Not now, but maybe sometime. Would you help me? Lena turned back. Ruth was looking at her with those watery blue eyes, and there was something desperate in them, something that made Lena's chest feel tight. Of course, Lena said. Anything you need, Mrs. Callahan. Ruth's smile was small and sad and grateful all at once. Thank you, dear. You're an angel. Thank you. Lena stepped into the hallway and pulled the door most of the way closed, leaving it cracked just enough to hear if Ruth called out. She stood there for a moment, listening to the silence of the building. Down the corridor, she could hear Mr. Patterson's oxygen machine humming. Somewhere above, pipes creaked and settled, but her mind stayed in room 412. Those letters under the pillow, hidden like secrets. That photograph of the smiling boy on the nightstand. Ruth's daily question about mail that never came. Lena pushed her medication cart toward room 413, but something nagged at her, a feeling she couldn't quite name. Ruth Callahan was waiting for something, or someone, and whatever it was, it mattered more to her than sleep, more than comfort, maybe more than anything else in her small quiet world. Lena didn't know it yet, but in 2 days Ruth would ask her for help. Real help. The kind that would require Lena to choose between following the rules and following her heart. The kind that would change everything. For Ruth, for a son who'd forgotten how to come home. And for Lena herself, who would have to decide how much she was willing to risk to give a dying woman one last chance at the thing she wanted most. To be remembered, to matter, to hear her son say, just one more time, that he loved her too. 2 mornings later, Lena was restocking the supply closet on the 4th floor when Ruth's call button lit up at the nurse's station. It was 6:45, almost the end of her shift, and every muscle in Lena's body ached with that specific exhaustion that came from being on your feet for 11 hours straight. But she grabbed a blood pressure cuff anyway, just in case, and headed to room 412. Ruth was awake, sitting up in bed, still in her nightgown. Her white hair stood up in wisps around her head like dandelion fluff. She had that look on her face again, that expression Lena had come to recognize. Waiting, hoping, trying not to hope too much. Everything okay, Mrs. Callahan? Lena set the blood pressure cuff on the bedside table. I'm so sorry to bother you. Ruth's hands twisted the edge of her blanket, worrying at the fabric. I know you're busy, and your shift is almost done. I wanted to ask you something. About what you said, about helping me if I needed it. Lena sat down on the edge of the bed, giving Ruth her full attention. I meant it. What do you need? Ruth took a shaky breath, and Lena could see her gathering courage, preparing to say something that clearly cost her. I need someone to write a letter for me. To my son. A letter. To Michael. Ruth's eyes went to the photograph on the nightstand, that gap-toothed boy frozen in time. He's very successful now, very busy. He runs a company in Chicago, technology I think, or maybe finance, something very important. Lena nodded, waiting, giving Ruth space to continue. I can't. Ruth stopped, and color rose in her pale cheeks, a flush of shame that made Lena's heart hurt. I can't write it myself. Is it your hands? Lena had seen arthritis make simple tasks impossible for so many residents. The arthritis. We could try some exercises, or maybe, no. Ruth's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I can't write it because I never learned how. I can't read either. I've never been able to. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with decades of shame. I never went to school past second grade, Ruth continued, the words tumbling out now, like she'd been holding them in too long. My father pulled me out. He needed me to work in the fields, and then in the factory when we moved to the city. School was for other children, not for me. Tears were sliding down Ruth's cheeks now, silent and steady. I know it's shameful, she said. A woman my age, 81 years old, and I can't even write my own name. I can't read a newspaper. I can't read the signs on the walls here. I've spent my whole life pretending, letting people think I just forgot my glasses or my eyes were bad. But the truth is, I'm ignorant. Stop. Lena reached out and took both of Ruth's hands in hers. You stop that right now. There is nothing shameful about this. You were a child who deserved an education and didn't get one. That's not your fault. That's not something to be ashamed of. Ruth sobbed once, a broken sound. But Michael, he writes to me sometimes. He sends letters, and I want to write back. I want him to know I'm thinking about him, that I remember him. But I can't do it alone. I need help. Then I'll help you, Lena said without hesitation. You will. Ruth's whole face transformed with hope. You really will. Yes. But I have one rule. Lena squeezed Ruth's hands gently. I write exactly what you tell me to write. Word for word. I don't add anything. I don't change anything. This is your letter, not mine. Your words, your feelings. I'm just the hand that puts them on paper. Understood? Yes. Yes, of course. Ruth was nodding eagerly now. Oh, sweetheart, thank you. Thank you so much. Can I see one of his letters? Lena asked. So I understand what you're responding to. Ruth's hands shook as she reached under her pillow and pulled out one of the folded papers. It had been opened and closed so many times the creases were nearly torn through. She handed it to Lena like it was something precious and fragile. Lena unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost mechanical in its efficiency. Dear Mother, I hope this finds you well. Work continues to be demanding. The merger is taking longer than anticipated, but we're making progress. I'll try to visit when my schedule allows. Best regards, Michael. That was it. 8 sentences. No warmth, no personal details, no I love you, or I miss you, or I'm thinking of you. Just a status update, like he was reporting to a manager instead of writing to his mother. Lena read it twice, searching for something more between the lines, but there was nothing there except obligation fulfilled. A box checked. He's very busy, Ruth said, and Lena realized she was defending him, making excuses. Very important. I understand he doesn't have much time for long letters. Lena folded the letter back carefully and handed it to Ruth. What do you want to say to him? Ruth closed her eyes, and Lena understood immediately. She'd been practicing, memorizing the words, because she couldn't write them down to remember them later. Dear Michael, Ruth began, her voice stronger now, like she was reading from a script only she could see. I hope you are doing well. I think about you every day. The weather here has been very cold, but I am staying warm. The nurses take good care of me. She paused, and Lena waited, pen hovering over the fresh notepad Ruth had pulled from her nightstand drawer. I've been remembering when you were small, Ruth continued, and now her voice cracked just slightly. You used to be so brave about everything except thunderstorms. You would climb into bed with me when the thunder started, and I would hold you and tell you stories until you fell asleep. Do you remember that? Ruth's breath hitched. I miss those days. I miss you, but I know you are busy building your life, and I am so proud of you, Michael. So proud of everything you've accomplished. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine here. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. She stopped, breathing hard like the words had taken everything she had. With all my love, Mother. Lena wrote it all down, her handwriting careful and clear. When she finished, she read it back to Ruth exactly as she'd written it, not changing a single word. Ruth listened with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face, and when Lena finished she nodded. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Lena folded the letter, slipped it into one of the envelopes Ruth had prepared, and wrote the address Ruth recited to her. Some office building in downtown Chicago. She pressed a stamp onto the corner. "I'll mail this on my way home," Lena promised. "It'll go out today." "Would you really?" Ruth gripped Lena's hand with surprising strength. "You'd really do that for me?" "I really would." Ruth lay back against her pillows, and Lena watched the tension drain from her face. For the first time since Lena had met her, Ruth looked almost peaceful. "Thank you, sweetheart," Ruth whispered. "You don't know what this means to me, you just don't know." But Lena was starting to understand. She was starting to see the shape of Ruth's loneliness, the way it had carved itself into her bones over months, maybe years. A son too busy to visit, too important to call, too successful to remember that his mother was aging alone in a nursing home in Michigan while he built his empire in Chicago. Over the next 2 weeks, it became their routine. Every few days, Ruth would ask Lena to write another letter, always in the early morning, right before Lena's shift ended, when the building was quiet and they wouldn't be interrupted. Always the same kind of words, gentle words, loving words, stories about the weather and the food and the other residents, assurances that Ruth was fine, that Michael shouldn't worry, that she understood how busy he was. Never any mention of how Ruth spent hours at that window, watching the parking lot like she was expecting someone who never came. Never any mention of how she asked about mail every single day, multiple times a day, her hope renewing itself despite constant disappointment. Never any mention of how her hands shook more with each passing week, or how she picked at her meals like a bird, eating less and less. Lena kept her promise. She wrote exactly what Ruth said, nothing more, nothing less. She mailed each letter on her way home, dropping them in the blue mailbox on the corner by the bus stop, watching them disappear into the slot, like messages in bottles cast into an ocean. And she tried not to think about the fact that Ruth never ever got any letters back. On the morning of the 15th day, Lena arrived for her shift and found Ruth at the window again. Same chair, same position, same desperate hope on her face when she turned at the sound of the door opening. "Any mail today, sweetheart?" "Not today, Mrs. Callahan." "I'm sorry." Ruth nodded, but this time Lena saw something crack in her expression, just for a second, just a flash of pure despair before she covered it with that apologetic smile. "That's all right, he's very busy. I understand." But Lena didn't understand. She didn't understand how a son could ignore letters from his 81-year-old mother. She didn't understand how someone could be so wrapped up in their own life that they couldn't find 5 minutes to write back to the woman who'd raised them. She was starting to feel angry, and she was starting to realize that sometimes the cruelest thing in the world wasn't hate or violence, it was indifference. It was being so consumed by your own importance that you forgot about the person who gave you life in the first place. Ruth pulled out another blank page from her nightstand. "Would you write one more for me? Just one more letter?" Lena picked up her pen and sat down. "Tell me what you want to say, Mrs. Callahan. I'm listening." The phone call came during Lena's lunch break on a Thursday. She was in the break room, eating a peanut butter sandwich she'd made at home because the cafeteria charged $6 for a wilted salad. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, and the coffee in the communal pot smelled burned and bitter. Diane Fletcher appeared in the doorway, 50-something, helmet hair sprayed into submission, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Around 1998. She'd been managing the 4th floor for 12 years and wielded her authority like a weapon. "Morris, my office, now." Lena wrapped up the rest of her sandwich and followed Diane down the hallway, her stomach suddenly tight with dread. Nothing good ever came from being summoned to Diane's office. The office was small and beige and smelled like stale coffee and air freshener trying to cover something worse. Diane sat down behind her cluttered desk and gestured for Lena to close the door. "We need to talk about Ruth Callahan." Lena's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "That depends on how you define okay." Diane pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer and opened it. "I received a call this morning from Ruth's bank, First National. They're conducting an investigation into some irregularities with her account." "What kind of irregularities?" "Apparently there have been several attempts to access her account information over the past few weeks, and when they pulled her signature card to verify some recent transactions, the signatures didn't match their records. The implication hit Lena like cold water. You think I'm stealing from her? I'm saying the bank is asking questions about who has access to Ruth, and your name came up. Diane's voice was flat, clinical. I need to know exactly what your relationship with this patient is. I don't have a relationship with her. I'm her nurse. I check her vitals, give her medications, make sure she's comfortable. And Diane's eyebrows arched, and I've been helping her write letters to her son. Letters. Diane said the word like it tasted bad. What kind of letters? Personal letters. She can't read or write, so she tells me what she wants to say, and I write it down for her. Then I mail them. And is she paying you for this service? No. She offered once, but I said no. I'm just helping her. Diane leaned back in her chair, studying Lena with the same expression she'd used to examine something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. Morris, you know the rules. We do not involve ourselves in residents' personal affairs. We do not handle their correspondence. We do not accept gifts or payments. This is exactly the kind of situation that creates problems. I'm not creating problems. I'm helping an old woman talk to her son. Are you? Diane's voice sharpened, because according to the information I received, Ruth's son hasn't had contact with her in over a year. No visits, no phone calls, and now suddenly there are letters being sent and signatures that don't match, and a nurse who's spending an awful lot of private time in her room. Lena felt heat flood her face. I haven't done anything wrong. Maybe not, but it looks wrong. And in this business, looking wrong is just as dangerous as being wrong. Diane closed the folder with a snap. I'm putting you on notice effective immediately. No more letter writing. No more special favors. You do your job, vital signs, medications, basic care and nothing else. If I hear about you spending time in Ruth Callahan's room for anything other than medical necessity, you'll be suspended pending a full investigation. Are we absolutely clear? You're telling me I can't help her communicate with her son. I'm telling you that you're a nurse, not a postal service. Diane picked up another file, dismissing her. And if you want to keep your nursing license, you'll remember the difference. Lena stood up, her hands trembling with anger she couldn't express. Are we done here? We're done. Diane didn't even look up. And Morris, I actually like you. You're a decent nurse. Don't throw your career away over some old woman's fantasy that her son gives a damn about her. Lena walked out of that office and went straight to the women's bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and leaned her forehead against the cool metal door, trying to breathe through the fury that was choking her. Some old woman's fantasy, like Ruth's love for her son, was pathetic, something to be mocked. That evening, right before her shift ended, Lena knocked quietly on the door of room 412. Ruth was in bed, staring at the ceiling. When she saw Lena, she tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mrs. Callahan. Lena sat in the chair by the bed, the one that had become her usual spot. How are you feeling today? Tired. Ruth's voice was so small it almost disappeared. Very tired. Did you? Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Did you get in trouble? Because of me? I heard some of the other nurses talking. News traveled fast in a nursing home. Faster than anywhere else Lena had ever worked. Don't you worry about that, Lena said. It's not your fault, but it is. Ruth was crying now, silent tears sliding down her papery cheeks. I asked you to help me, and now you're in trouble. I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause problems for you. I just wanted to write to my son. I wanted him to know I'm still here, that I still think about him. Lena reached out and took Ruth's hand. It felt like holding a bird, all hollow bones and trembling. You didn't do anything wrong, Lena said firmly. But now you can't help me anymore. Ruth's sobs were stronger now, shaking her whole thin frame. And I don't know what to do. I can't write the letters myself. I can't tell him what I want to say. And he's so busy he doesn't call, he doesn't visit, and the letters were the only way I could reach him. They were all I had. Lena sat there, holding this dying woman's hand, and felt something inside her shift and settle into place. She thought about the rules and regulations, about her nursing license and Diane's warning, and big investigation, about everything she could lose. Then she thought about Ruth,
sitting in this room every single day, watching that window, waiting for a son who never came. I'm still going to help you, Lena heard herself say. Ruth's eyes went wide. But your job, we'll be more careful, Lena said. We'll be smart about it, but I'm not stopping. You deserve to talk to your son. And if writing letters is the only way you can do that, then we're going to keep writing letters. Oh, sweetheart. Ruth pulled Lena's hand to her chest, holding it over her heart. Thank you so much, but I don't want you to risk. Let me worry about that, Lena said gently. You just focus on what you want to say to Michael, okay? Ruth nodded, crying and smiling at the same time. Lena stayed with her for a few more minutes, then went to finish her final rounds before shift change. She stopped at the nurse's station to check the medication schedule for the next shift, and happened to glance at the computer screen. Ruth Callahan's chart was open. Someone had updated it. Lena's eyes caught on the new entry in the diagnosis section. Stage IV. Ovarian cancer, metastatic, liver and lymph nodes involved. Prognosis, 8 to 12 weeks, and below that in smaller red text, patient has declined family notification per her explicit request. Lena stood there in the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the late evening sun slanting through the windows at the far end of the corridor. Ruth wasn't just lonely, Ruth was dying, and she was choosing to die alone, writing letters to a son who never wrote back, protecting him from the truth, because she didn't want to be a burden on his important life. Lena closed the chart, and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Snow was beginning to fall again, fat flakes drifting down through the darkening sky. She thought about her own mother, how at the end, Lena had been there every single day, sitting beside her bed, reading to her, holding her hand, making sure she knew she was loved, making sure she wasn't afraid. Ruth didn't have that. Ruth had an empty room and unanswered letters and a son who was too busy to remember she existed. Lena pressed her forehead against the cold glass and made a decision.
She was going to help Ruth. Rules or no rules, job or no job, investigation or no investigation, because some things mattered more than following orders and keeping your head down. Some things, like making sure a dying woman didn't spend her last weeks believing she'd been forgotten, mattered more than anything else in the world. 3 days later, Lena let herself into room 412 at 5:30 in the morning, an hour before the day shift started arriving. Ruth was already awake, sitting in her chair dressed in a pale blue sweater Lena had never seen before. She'd put on lipstick, a faint pink that made her look less ghostly. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was staring down at the blank piece of paper on the small table in front of her like it was a test she was terrified of failing. "Good morning," Lena said softly, closing the door behind her. Ruth turned and relief washed over her face like sunrise. "You came. I thought maybe, after the trouble. I said I would help you, didn't I?" Lena pulled the footstool over and sat down. "I keep my promises. You ready?" Ruth nodded. She'd been practicing again. Lena could tell by the way her lips moved slightly, silently rehearsing words only she could hear. "Dear Michael," Ruth began, her voice steady and clear like she was reading from an invisible script. "I hope you are doing well. I am fine. The weather has been cold but I stay warm. I think about you often." She paused, and Lena wrote, her pen moving smoothly across the paper. "I hope your work is going well. I know how hard you work, and I'm so proud of you. I've always been proud of you, from the time you were a little boy. You were always so smart, so determined." Another pause. Ruth's breathing was shallower now. "Please don't worry about me. I'm comfortable here. The nurses are kind to me. I have everything I need. I just wanted you to know that you're in my thoughts. Always." Lena's pen hesitated on the paper. She looked up at Ruth, really looked at her, the dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide, the way her collarbone jutted out sharp under that sweater, the tremor in her hands that was worse this week than last week. Ruth had nothing she needed. What she needed was sitting in an office in Chicago too busy to call. "Is that all?" Lena asked, her voice tight. "Just," Ruth's eyes went distant, unfocused. "Just sign it, with all my love, Mother." Lena wrote the words. She folded the letter. She addressed the envelope to that same office building in Chicago. And then she stopped. She sat there, staring at that envelope, at the address written in her own careful handwriting, at the stamp waiting to be affixed. She thought about the chart she'd read. Stage 4. 8 to 12 weeks. Patient has declined family notification. She thought about Michael Callahan, sitting in some glass tower office, making deals and checking emails and building his empire, while his mother sat here waiting to die. Lena's hand was shaking as she picked up the pen again. "Mrs. Callahan," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Why don't you tell him the truth about being sick?" Ruth's face crumpled. "I can't do that to him. He's so busy, his work is so important. If I told him, he would feel obligated to come, and I don't want to be an obligation. I don't want to be a burden." "What if you're not a burden?" Lena leaned forward. "What if you're giving him a chance to show up for you, to be there when you need him?" "He doesn't need that guilt," Ruth said, shaking her head. "I raised him to be strong, to be successful, to not let anything hold him back. I can't be the thing that holds him back now." "But what about what you need?" Lena's voice was gentle but insistent. "Don't you deserve to have your son with you? Don't you deserve to ask for that?" Ruth was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm his mother. A mother's job is to give, not to take, to support, not to need. I've done my job, I raised him right, now I need to let him live his life." Lena felt something break inside her chest. "Mrs. Callahan," she said softly, "what if I added something to this letter? Just one sentence, something that tells him what you really need, even if you're too kind to say it yourself." Ruth's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, sometimes we don't say what we really want to say because we're trying to be polite. We're trying not to be a burden. But maybe your son needs to hear the truth. Maybe he needs to know that you want to see him." "I can't ask him to come," Ruth whispered. "I just can't." "What if you didn't ask him to come? What if you just suggested dinner, one meal? That's not asking too much, is it?" Ruth stared at her, torn between hope and fear. "What would you write?" Ruth asked finally. Lena took a breath. This was it. This was the line she'd promised herself she wouldn't cross. Once she stepped over it, there was no going back. "I would write," Lena said slowly, "that if he could find the time, you would love to have dinner with him. Just one meal, that's all." Ruth covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. I can't ask him that." "You're not asking, I am." Lena unfolded the letter again. "Let me add it, Mrs. Callahan. Just this once. If he doesn't come, we never do it again. But give him the chance. Give yourself the chance to be honest about what you want." Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Lena's hand shook as she uncapped the pen. She added the words carefully, just above the signature. "If you could find the time to visit, even just for one meal, it would mean more to me than I can say." She folded the letter quickly, before she could second-guess herself, before Ruth could change her mind. "I'll mail it this morning," Lena said, standing up. "Wait." Ruth grabbed her wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "What if he's angry? What if he thinks I'm trying to manipulate him?" "Then he's angry," Lena said gently. "But at least he'll know the truth. At least you'll have tried." Ruth released her wrist and nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue from the box on her nightstand. Okay, mail it." Lena left the room, clutching the envelope like it might explode. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She walked past the nurse's station where the night shift was finishing charting, past the break room where 2 CNAs were making coffee, down the stairs instead of taking the elevator because she needed time to think, to breathe, to understand what she'd just done. She'd crossed the line, she'd broken her promise, she'd added her own words to Ruth's letter. But as she pushed through the front doors of Oak Ridge Care Home into the freezing pre-dawn darkness, she couldn't make herself regret it. The mailbox was 2 blocks away. Lena walked through snow that came up over her ankles, soaking through her sneakers. The wind bit at her face and made her eyes water. She stood in front of that blue mailbox for a full minute, the letter in her hand, watching her breath cloud in the air. She thought about everything she could lose: her job, her nursing license, the only income keeping her and Devon from ending up on the street. She thought about Ruth, sitting in that room alone, dying slowly, too kind to ask for what she needed. Lena dropped the letter through the slot. The sound of it hitting the bottom was final, irreversible. She stood there in the snow, the wind howling around her, and realized she was crying. Not because she was afraid, but because she'd just done something that could destroy her life, and she knew with absolute certainty that she'd do it again. Because some people were worth breaking the rules for. Some people, like a lonely old woman who just wanted to share one meal with her son before she died, were worth every risk in the world. 6 days later, Lena was checking vitals in room 409 when she heard the commotion downstairs. Voices, sharp, insistent, cutting through the usual quiet of the mid-morning lull. She could hear Diane's voice, tight and professional in that way, that meant someone important was demanding something. Lena stepped into the hallway and looked toward the elevator bank. A small crowd had gathered at the nurse's station. 2 CNAs, the physical therapist, Diane, and someone Lena couldn't quite see. Then the crowd shifted slightly, and she saw him. Tall, easily over 6 feet. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lena made in 3 months. Late 30s, dark hair going silver at the temples, jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from boardrooms and corner offices, from a life where people listened when you spoke. He was holding a piece of paper in his hand, crumpled like he'd been gripping it too hard for too long. Michael Callahan. It had to be. I need to see her medical records immediately, he was saying. His voice controlled but with an edge underneath like a knife wrapped in silk. I need to know exactly what her condition is, what treatments she's receiving, everything. Diane was using her professional voice, the helpful but firm tone that really meant no. Sir, I completely understand your concern, but we need to verify your identity first, and then we'll need to discuss privacy regulations and what information we're legally able to. I'm her son. Michael's voice went hard and cold. Her only living family. I have every right to know what's happening with my mother's health, and will absolutely facilitate that, Diane said smoothly. But we have procedures we need to follow. If you could just come to my office. Michael's eyes swept the hallway, taking in every detail with the kind of focus Lena imagined he used in negotiations. His gaze landed on her and stopped. You, he pointed directly at Lena, are you the nurse who's been writing letters for my mother? The hallway went silent. Every eye turned to Lena. She felt Diane's stare burning into her, felt the weight of every person watching, waiting. Lena's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I've been helping Mrs. Callahan with correspondence, yes. Michael strode toward her, and Lena had to fight every instinct not to step back. He stopped 3 feet away, and she could see his eyes clearly now. Dark brown, furious, terrified. We need to talk, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Right now. He turned and walked toward the small visitors' lounge at the end of the hall, clearly expecting her to follow. Lena looked at Diane. Her supervisor's face was white, then red, her mouth compressed into a thin line, but she gave a sharp nod. Go. Lena followed Michael Callahan into the lounge with its donated furniture and fake plants and faded poster about hand washing. He closed the door behind her with a controlled click that was somehow louder than if he'd slammed it. He turned to face her, holding up the letter, Ruth's letter, the one Lena had mailed 6 days ago. Did my mother write this? His voice was still controlled, but barely. A dam holding back something huge. Mrs. Callahan told me what to write, and did she write this part? He jabbed his finger at the paper. This part right here. If you could find the time to visit, even just for one meal. Did my mother say those exact words, or did you add them? Lena met his eyes. No point in lying now. I added them. Why? The word came out sharp as a gunshot. Because she was too kind to ask for what she needed. Michael laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness and anger. Too kind, right? So you decided to manipulate the situation. To guilt-trip me, to make me drop everything and come running up here. Is that what you did? Lena kept her voice level, even though her heart was racing. Drop everything. I canceled a merger meeting worth $40 million. Do you have any idea what that costs? What that does to investor confidence? Do you have any idea what your mother is going through? The question hit him like a physical blow. He actually took a step backward, his face going pale. What are you talking about? This was it. The moment Lena betrayed Ruth's trust completely or let this man walk away still blind to the truth. Your mother is dying, Lena said quietly. Stage 4 ovarian cancer, metastasized to her liver and lymph nodes.
8 to 12 weeks according to her latest prognosis, and she specifically requested that no one tell you because she didn't want to interrupt your important life. The letter fell from Michael's hand, drifting to the floor like a wounded bird. No, his voice was barely a whisper. That's not. She would have told me. She would have said something. She did tell you, Lena said, and she couldn't keep the edge from her voice anymore. Through those letters, through asking about mail every single day, through sitting at that window for hours, hoping you'd surprise her with a visit, she's been telling you in every way she knows how, and you've been too busy to listen. Michael sank into one of the chairs, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. He put his head in his hands. Why? His voice was broken. Why would she hide this from me? Because you're busy, Lena said softer now. Because your work is important. Because she loves you enough to die alone, rather than be an inconvenience to your schedule. I didn't know. Michael looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. I swear to God, I didn't know she was sick. I thought, I don't know what I thought. That she was fine, that she'd always be there, that I had time. Now you know, Lena said. So what are you going to do about it? He stood up, straightening his tie with shaking hands. Can I see her? Can I see her now? Room 412, 4th floor. He started for the door, then stopped, turning back to look at Lena. Why did you do it? He asked, his voice raw. Why did you risk your job to add that line to her letter? Lena thought about her mother, about those final weeks in hospice, about reading to her, and holding her hand, and making absolutely sure she knew, every single day, that she was loved. Because everyone deserves that chance, Lena said simply. To ask for what they need, to be loved while they can still feel it. Your mother deserved that chance. Michael nodded slowly, his throat working. Then he walked out of the lounge, and down the hallway toward the elevators. Lena watched him go, knowing that Diane was going to crucify her for this. Knowing she'd probably just ended her career at Oak Ridge, maybe her entire nursing career. But as she saw Michael pause outside the elevator, saw him wipe his eyes, and square his shoulders before pressing the button, she thought maybe it had been worth it. Maybe some rules existed to be broken. Maybe some risks were worth taking. Maybe sometimes, the most important thing a nurse could do had nothing to do with medications or vital signs. Maybe sometimes, the most important thing was reminding people how to be human. Lena didn't wait to see what happened next. She went back to her rounds, checking blood pressures and refilling water pitchers, and trying not to think about the conversation happening 4 floors above her. But 23 minutes later, Diane found her in the medication room. My office, now. Diane's voice could have frozen water. Lena followed her supervisor down the hallway for the second time in 2 weeks. She knew what was coming. Had known since the moment Michael Callahan pointed at her in that corridor. Diane closed her office door, with more force than necessary, and sat down behind her desk. This time she didn't tell Lena to sit. Bad sign. I just got off the phone with Michael Callahan, Diane said, her voice ice cold. He told me about your little conversation. Do you want to explain to me what happened with that letter? I added a line, Lena said. 1 sentence, asking if he could visit for a meal. You added a line. Diane repeated it like she was trying to understand a foreign language. To a letter you were supposed to be transcribing word for word, from a patient who is illiterate and vulnerable. Do you understand how this looks? I understand. Do you? Diane stood up, her hands flat on her desk. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you manipulated a vulnerable elderly patient into sending an emotionally charged message to her wealthy son. It looks like elder abuse. It looks like you were trying to create a situation where you'd be seen as indispensable to a rich family. It looks very, very bad. That's not what happened. Then explain it to me. Diane's voice rose. Make me understand why you thought it was appropriate to insert yourself into a family relationship. That's none of your business. Lena took a breath, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Callahan is dying. Her son doesn't know because she refuses to tell him. She writes him letters every week through me, and he never writes back, never calls, never visits. She wanted one meet with him, just one. And she was too scared to ask, because she thought she'd be a burden. So I asked for her. That wasn't your decision to make. Someone had to make it. Lena's voice was rising now too. Someone had to tell that man his mother is dying alone in a nursing home while he builds his empire. Someone had to give him a chance to show up for her before it's too late. And you decided that someone should be you, Diane said, her face flushed red. You, a nurse with barely 3 months on this floor, decided you knew better than everyone else, better than the patient herself, better than her doctors, better than me. I did what I thought was right. Diane slammed her hand on the desk, making Lena jump. You broke every rule in our code of conduct. You violated patient autonomy. You inserted yourself into personal family dynamics. You manipulated a situation for your own moral satisfaction. And you did it all because you thought you knew what was best for everyone involved. Lena stood there, taking it, because what else could she do? Diane was right about the rules, wrong about everything else, but right about the rules. I'm suspending you, Diane said, her voice final, effective immediately, pending a full investigation by our legal team and the state board. If the family decides to press charges for elder abuse or emotional manipulation, you could lose your license permanently. Do you understand the severity of this? I understand. Then get your things and leave. You're not to set foot in this facility or contact any of our patients until HR gives you clearance. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Lena turned toward the door, her legs shaking so badly she wasn't sure they'd carry her. And Morris, Diane's voice stopped her. I hope that old woman's gratitude keeps you warm when you're trying to find work as a waitress, because you're done as a nurse. You're absolutely done. Lena walked out of that office, past the nurse's station where everyone was pretending not to stare, past the medication room, past room 412, where she could hear voices inside. Ruth soft and wondering, Michael's deep and choked with emotion. She got her coat from her locker, grabbed her bag, and headed for the stairs. She was halfway down when she heard footsteps above her, rapid and purposeful. Wait, please wait. She turned around. Michael Callahan stood at the top of the stairs, breathing hard like he'd been running. His tie was loose now, hanging crooked. His hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were red and swollen. I need to talk to you, he said. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Please. He came down a few steps. Just 5 minutes. Please. Lena looked at him. This man she didn't know, who just cost her everything. Okay, she said quietly. 5 minutes. They went outside into the parking lot. It had started snowing again. Light flakes that stuck to Michael's expensive suit and melted. The cold bit through Lena's thin coat. I'm sorry, Michael said. Lena blinked. What? I'm sorry, for what I said upstairs, for accusing you of manipulation. I was scared and angry, and I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. It's fine. It's not fine. He shook his head, and snow caught in his hair. I just spent 30 minutes with my mother. Do you know what she said to me when I walked in? Lena waited. She apologized, Michael said, his voice breaking. She apologized for bothering me, for making me drive all the way from Chicago. She told me I should get back because I must have important meetings. He was crying now, standing in the parking lot in his $1,000 suit, tears running down his face. And the whole time she was apologizing, I was looking at her, really looking at her, for the first time in God knows how long. And I saw how thin she is, how her hands shake, how she can barely stand without help. And I realized I haven't truly seen my mother in years. Lena's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. I've been sending her straight to voicemail, Michael continued. When she calls, I see her name and think, I'll call her back later. I'll call her when I have time. And I never do, because there's always another meeting, another crisis, another deal, always something more important than talking to my mother. She understands, Lena said softly. She knows you're busy. She shouldn't have to understand. Michael wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. She's my mother. She raised me alone after my dad walked out. She worked 3 jobs to keep me in school. She went without meals so I could eat. She sacrificed everything for me, and this is how I repay her, by being too busy to answer the phone. Lena didn't know what to say. That line you added to her letter, Michael said, about visiting for a meal. Do you know what it made me feel? Guilty. Terrified, he said, looking directly at her. Because I realized that if you hadn't written it, I would have stayed in Chicago. I would have sent a check and told myself that was enough. And I would have missed this, all of this. I would have let her die thinking I didn't care enough to show up. You're here now, Lena said. Because of you. Michael took a step closer. You risked your job, your entire career, to make sure I knew the truth. You broke the rules to give me a chance to make this right. Why? Why would you do that for someone you don't even know? Lena thought about how to answer. She thought about her mother, about those final weeks, about the way she'd held her hand and sung to her, and made absolutely sure she wasn't alone. Because I know what it's like, she said finally, to watch someone die, to sit beside them and be there until the very end. My mom died 6 years ago, ovarian cancer just like your mother, and I got to be there with her. I got to tell her I loved her. I got to say goodbye properly. She looked up at Michael. Your mother deserves that too. She deserves to have her son there, to know she matters, to know she's not forgotten. And I couldn't just stand by and watch her die, alone. I couldn't do that. Michael was quiet for a long moment, snow falling around them. Then he said, they suspended you. I know. Because you helped my mother. Because you helped me. Because I broke the rules. I'm going to fix this, Michael said, and his voice had that boardroom certainty again. I'm going to talk to the administration. I'm going to make sure they understand you didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. You gave me my mother back. You gave me time I would never have had. The least I can do is make sure you don't lose everything for being a decent human being. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you. Michael nodded. Then he held out his hand. Lena shook it. His grip was strong and steady. I need to get back inside, he said. I promised Mom I'd have lunch with her. Actually sit down and eat with her, not just stand there checking my phone. She'll love that. I hope so. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, made him look younger, softer, more like the gap-toothed boy in that photo. And Lena, yes, thank you, for everything, for caring when no one else did, for taking a risk when you didn't have to, for reminding me what actually matters. He walked back toward Oak Ridge Care Home, and Lena stood in the falling snow, watching him go. She'd lost her job, probably her license, maybe her entire future as a nurse, but right now, in this moment, watching Michael Callahan walk back to his mother instead of back to his office, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt like she'd done something that mattered, something real, something that would echo beyond this parking lot, beyond this day, beyond whatever investigation came next. She'd given a dying woman her son back, and sometimes, that was worth everything. Michael Callahan didn't leave Oak Ridge Care Home that day, or the next day, or the day after that. Lena heard about it from Devin, who heard it from his friend Marcus, whose mother worked in the Oak Ridge kitchen. Apparently the high-powered CEO who'd been too busy to visit his mother for over a year had checked into the Holiday Inn 3 blocks down and was spending every day in room 412. Lena wasn't allowed back at the facility while the investigation was ongoing, but she couldn't stop thinking about Ruth, wondering if she was okay, wondering if Michael was really showing up, or if this was just a temporary guilt trip before he went back to his real life. 5 days into her suspension, her phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello, Lena, it's Michael Callahan. Her heart jumped. Is everything okay? Is Ruth? She's okay. Well, not okay exactly, but she's happy, I think. Happier than I've seen her in a long time. He paused. I'm calling because she keeps asking about you. She wants to see you. Would you be willing to visit as a guest, not staff? I'm suspended. I'm not supposed to be on the property. I talked to the administrator, Michael said. Mr. Hendricks, I may have mentioned something about a substantial donation to the facility's capital improvement fund. You're cleared to visit whenever you want. Lena sat down on her couch. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. My mother misses you, and honestly, I'd like to see you too, to thank you properly. Could you come tomorrow? Around noon maybe? She thought about all the reasons she should say no, the investigation, the rules, the way everyone at Oakridge probably hated her now. What time did you say? Noon. I'll be there. The next day, Lena walked through the front doors of Oakridge Care Home, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of scrubs. It felt strange, being there as a visitor, instead of staff. Strange walking past the nurse's station without stopping to check charts or grab supplies. Diane was at the desk reviewing medication orders. Their eyes met for half a second before Diane looked away, her mouth tight with disapproval. Lena kept walking. Room 412's door was halfway open. She could hear voices inside, talking, laughing. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Ruth was sitting in her chair by the window, and she looked different. Still thin, still frail, but there was color in her cheeks now, light in her eyes. She was wearing that same blue sweater, and someone had done her hair, pinned it back with a small silver clip, and Michael was sitting on the floor beside her chair, his suit jacket draped over the back of the bed, his tie completely gone, looking at a photo album spread across his lap. Lena. Ruth's whole face lit up like Christmas morning. Oh sweetheart, you came. I've been so worried about you. Michael stood up quickly, brushing off his pants. I'll give you two some privacy. No, please stay, Ruth said, reaching for his hand. I want you both here, my two angels. So Michael sat back down on the floor, and Lena pulled up the footstool she'd sat on so many times before, and for the next hour, they looked at photographs. Ruth couldn't read the captions written beneath the pictures, but she'd memorized every single image. She told stories about Michael as a baby, as a toddler, as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, who was terrified of thunder, but would fight any kid who picked on someone smaller. She told stories about working double shifts at the textile factory, coming home at midnight, to find young Michael asleep at the kitchen table, still trying to finish his homework. About saving up for 6 months to buy him a winter coat that actually fit. About the time he won the county science fair, and she was so proud she cried in front of all the other parents. Michael listened to all of it, and Lena watched him, watched the way he held his mother's hand, thumb rubbing gentle circles on her papery skin, the way he leaned his head against her knee like a child, the way he looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face, trying to make up for all the years he hadn't really looked.
This was what Ruth had wanted. Not money or letters or phone calls. This, her son sitting beside her, present and real, and choosing to be there. When the stories finally wound down, Ruth looked tired, her eyelids drooping. You should rest, Mom, Michael said softly, standing up and helping her to her feet. I'm fine, Ruth protested weakly, but she let him guide her to the bed. Michael tucked the blanket around her with a tenderness that made Lena's throat tight. Sleep for a bit. I'll be right here when you wake up. I promise. You don't have to stay, Ruth murmured, her eyes already closing. You must have work to do. Work can wait. Michael bent down and kissed her forehead. I'm not going anywhere, Mom. Not anymore. Ruth smiled, and within seconds she was asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Michael and Lena stepped quietly into the hallway, leaving the door cracked so they could hear if Ruth called out. Thank you for coming, Michael said quietly. She's been asking about you constantly, worried that you lost your job because of her. I keep telling her you're fine, but she doesn't believe me. How is she really? Lena asked. Be honest. Michael's face fell. Not good. I talked to her oncologist yesterday, Dr. Sharma. She said the cancer is progressing faster than they initially thought. It's not 8 to 12 weeks anymore. It's more like 4 to 6, maybe less. I'm so sorry. Me too.
His voice cracked.
I wasted so much time, years. I was so focused on proving myself, on being successful, on showing the world I was more than just some poor kid from Michigan. And I forgot about the person who made all of that possible. The person who actually believed in me when no one else did.
You're here now,
Lena said. That's what matters. Is it? He looked at her, his eyes desperate. Is being here for a few weeks enough to make up for years of ignored phone calls, years of birthdays I forgot, years of her sitting in this room alone, writing me letters I never answered? I don't know, Lena said honestly, but it's better than nothing. It's better than her dying without you ever showing up. It's better than spending the rest of your life wishing you'd been here. Michael nodded slowly. I called my CFO yesterday, Told him I'm taking a leave of absence. However long Mom has, I'm staying. I've cleared my schedule completely. She'll be so happy. I hope so. He smiled, small and sad. I hope I can give her even a fraction of what she gave me, even just a fraction. They stood there in the quiet hallway, two people who'd been strangers 10 days ago, now connected by one dying woman and a letter that changed everything. Thank you, Michael said again, for caring about her, for seeing what I was too blind to see. Lena squeezed his arm. Take care of her. That's all the thanks I need. She left him standing guard outside his mother's door and walked back through Oak Ridge Care Home. As she passed the nurse's station, she saw Diane watching her. But this time there was something different in her supervisor's expression. Not quite approval, not quite understanding, but maybe, just maybe, the beginning of it. The call came at 4:17 in the morning. 3 weeks later, Lena was dreaming about something she couldn't remember when her phone rang and jolted her awake. She grabbed it from her nightstand, her heart already sinking the way it always did when the phone rang in the middle of the night. Unknown number, she answered, her voice thick with sleep. Hello, Lena. Michael's voice was wrecked, barely recognizable. It's happening. The hospice nurse says it's time. Mom's asking for you. Can you come? I'm on my way. She threw on jeans and a sweatshirt, grabbed her keys and drove through empty streets to Oak Ridge. The lobby was quiet except for the night security guard, who recognized her and waved her through without question. 4th floor, room 412. The door was open. Ruth was in bed, propped up on pillows, her breathing labored and rattling. A hospice nurse Lena didn't recognize stood quietly in the corner, monitoring but not interfering. And Michael was on his knees beside the bed, holding his mother's hand, his forehead pressed against the mattress like he was praying. Lena, Ruth whispered when she saw her, and even that one word sounded like it cost her everything. You came. Of course I came. Lena moved to the other side of the bed and took Ruth's other hand. It was ice cold despite the heated blanket. I wanted to thank you, Ruth said, each word separated by a labored breath. For everything. For the letters, for bringing my boy back to me, for giving me these weeks with him. You don't need to thank me. I do. Ruth's eyes were bright with tears and something else, peace maybe. Completion. I got what I wanted. I got my son back. Even just for a little while. That's more than I ever hoped for. Michael lifted his head, his face wet with tears. Mom, please, don't talk. Save your strength. For what, sweetheart? Ruth smiled at him. And it was the saddest, most beautiful thing Lena had ever seen. I'm done. It's okay. I'm ready. I'm not. Michael's voice shattered completely. I'm not ready to lose you. You're not losing me, Ruth said, reaching up with a trembling hand to touch his face. I'm always with you. Right here. She tapped his chest over his heart. Everything I am, everything I know I gave to you. You carry me with you always. I love you, Mom. The words came out like they were being torn from him. I know, baby. I've always known. And I'm so proud of you. So proud. Ruth's breathing was getting worse, shorter, more labored. Promise me something, anything at all. Don't waste time anymore. Don't let work become more important than people. Don't make the people who love you wait for you to have time for them. She looked at Lena, then back at Michael. Life is short. Love is everything. Remember that. I promise, Michael whispered. I promise, Mom. Ruth nodded, satisfied. She looked at both of them, her eyes moving slowly from Michael to Lena and back again. My two angels, she murmured, taking care of each other now. Her eyes drifted closed and her breathing changed, slower, more shallow, the spaces between breaths growing longer. The hospice nurse stepped forward quietly, checking Ruth's pulse, her oxygen levels, but didn't interfere. This was how Ruth wanted it, peacefully, with her son and the nurse who'd cared enough to break the rules. Michael climbed onto the bed, carefully, and lay down beside his mother. He wrapped his arms around her tiny frame and held her the way she must have held him 1,000 times when he was small and scared. I'm here, Mom, he whispered against her hair. I'm right here, you don't have to be afraid. Lena stayed at Ruth's side, holding her hand, stroking her hair, murmuring soft words about how loved she was, how she'd been such a good mother, how she could rest now. Ruth took one more breath, then another, smaller, then nothing. The silence in the room was absolute. Michael sobbed against his mother's shoulder, his whole body shaking with grief. Lena kept holding Ruth's hand as it grew colder, as the warmth and life slowly left it, as the gentle soul who'd lived in that fragile body, finally rested. The hospice nurse checked for a pulse, for a heartbeat, found nothing. She looked up and nodded gently. "She's gone. I'm so sorry for your loss." Michael didn't move. He just held his mother, crying like a child, grieving for all the time he'd lost, and all the time he'd never get back. Lena stepped away, giving him privacy for his grief. She looked at Ruth's face, peaceful now, free from pain and loneliness, and the weight of loving someone who'd forgotten to love her back. She thought about the letters and the risks and the choice she'd made to add those words. It had been worth it. Every second had been worth it. Because Ruth Callahan hadn't died alone. She died loved. She died knowing her son came back for her, that she mattered, that all those years of sacrifice had meant something. And sometimes, Lena thought, wiping tears from her own eyes, that was all any of us really wanted, to die knowing we were loved, to die knowing we mattered, to die knowing someone would miss us when we were gone. The funeral was on a Thursday, 5 days after Ruth's death. It was small. Ruth hadn't had many friends left. Most had passed years ago or moved to be near their own children. But the people who came filled the front 3 rows of the chapel, and they told stories about a woman who was kind to everyone, who never complained, who always had a smile even when life was hard. Michael gave the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a black suit, his hands gripping the edges like he needed something to hold on to, and he talked about his mother, about her strength and her sacrifice and her love, about the years he'd wasted chasing success while she waited for him, about the final weeks he'd been given because one nurse had cared enough to break the rules. He didn't say Lena's name, but she felt every eye in that chapel turn to look at her anyway. After the service, after Ruth was laid to rest in a cemetery overlooking a small lake she'd always loved, Michael found Lena standing by her car. "Thank you for coming," he said. Of course, they stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then Michael pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is for you." "Michael, no, I don't want your money. It's not money." He pressed it into her hand. "Just read it when you get home, please." Lena took the envelope and watched him walk to his car, watched him drive away to whatever life waited for him in Chicago. She went home to the small apartment she shared with Devon, made herself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Michael's precise script. "Dear Lena, I don't know how to thank you adequately for what you've done. You gave me back my mother. You gave me weeks I never would have had. You gave me the chance to say goodbye and to tell her I loved her and to hold her hand while she died. But more than that, you taught me something I'd forgotten. You taught me that love matters more than success, that showing up matters more than showing off, that the people we love deserve our time, not our excuses. My mother died happy because of you. She died knowing she mattered. That's a gift I can never repay, but I can try to honor it. I'm starting a foundation in my mother's name, the Ruth Callahan Project. Its mission is to help elderly people in nursing homes stay connected with their families, letter writing services, video call setups, transportation assistance for visits, whatever it takes to make sure no one dies alone the way my mother almost did. And I want you to run it. I know you're still dealing with the investigation at Oak Ridge. I know your nursing career is uncertain, but I'm offering you something different. A chance to do what you do best, care for people who need it, without bureaucratic rules that prevent you from actually helping. The salary is $65,000 to start, with full benefits, health insurance for you and your brother, and complete autonomy to build the program however you think it should work. I've already spoken to Oak Ridge's legal team and the state board. The investigation is being closed. No charges, no marks on your record. You're free to go back to nursing if that's what you want, but I hope you'll consider this instead. Think about it, please. With more gratitude than I can express, Michael Callahan. At the bottom was a phone number and an email address. Lena read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking, tea growing cold beside her. A foundation, a real job helping people. Freedom to actually make a difference without worrying about crossing invisible lines. It felt impossible, too good to be true. But then again, 2 months ago she never would have believed she'd risk everything to help an illiterate old woman write letters to her son.
She pulled out her phone and dialed the number. Michael answered on the first ring. "Lena, I'll do it," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I'll run your foundation," she heard him exhale, relief obvious even over the phone. Thank you so much, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Whatever you need. We don't just help with letters and visits," Lena said. "We train people, nurses, caregivers, family members. We teach them how to really listen, how to see when someone's suffering in silence, how to ask the hard questions, how to show up before it's too late." "Yes," Michael said immediately. "Absolutely yes, whatever you think will help, we'll do it." Lena smiled through tears. "Then let's get started." 2 weeks later the investigation officially concluded. The board at Oak Ridge found that while Lena had technically violated protocol, her actions had been in the patient's best interest and had resulted in a positive outcome for the family. No charges, no suspension. Clean record. Diane called her personally to deliver the news. "You're lucky, Morris," Diane said, her voice tight. "You could have lost everything." "I know," Lena replied, "but I'd do it again in a heartbeat." There was a long silence. Then Diane said quietly, "I believe you would, and maybe that's not entirely a bad thing." Lena gave her notice the next day. She wasn't going back to Oak Ridge. She had different work to do now. The Ruth Callahan Project launched officially on March 15, 3 months after Ruth's death. Michael's money and connections opened doors. Lena's passion and vision gave the foundation its soul. Within 6 months they'd partnered with 20 nursing homes across Michigan. Within a year they'd expanded to Illinois, Ohio, and Indiana. They trained volunteers to write letters for residents who couldn't write themselves. They set up video call stations in common rooms so families could connect face-to-face even when distance separated them. They provided transportation grants for families who wanted to visit but couldn't afford the gas or bus fare. And they taught one simple message over and over to anyone who would listen. Love the people in your life while you still can. Don't wait for someday. Don't assume there will be more time. Show up. Be present. Say the words that need saying. Because someday it will be too late, and you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you'd answered just one more phone call, written just one more letter, made just one more visit. 1 year after Ruth's death, the Ruth Callahan Project held its first annual benefit dinner. It was in a hotel ballroom in downtown Detroit, attended by donors and partners and families who'd been helped by the foundation's work. Michael gave a speech about his mother, about the lessons she'd taught him, about the importance of showing up for the people who matter. Then he introduced Lena. She stood at the podium in a navy dress Devin had helped her pick out, looking at a room full of 200 people who'd come together because of one old woman's love for her son and one nurse's decision to break the rules. "A year ago," Lena began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I met a woman named Ruth Callahan. She was 81 years old. She couldn't read or write, and she was dying alone in a nursing home, convinced her son was too busy to care about her." The room was completely silent. Ruth wrote letters to her son every week, or rather, she told me what to say, and I wrote the words down. She told him she was fine. She told him not to worry. She told him she loved him. She never told him she was dying because she didn't want to be a burden on his successful life. Lena looked at Michael, standing at the side of the stage. He was smiling, but his eyes were wet. "I broke the rules to help Ruth," Lena continued. "I added one sentence to one of her letters that she didn't ask me to write. I told her son she wanted to see him, and because of that one sentence he came. He spent the last weeks of her life by her side. He got to hold her hand when she died. He got to tell her he loved her one last time." She paused, letting that sink in. Ruth's story isn't unique. Right now there are thousands of people in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, waiting for phone calls that never come, writing letters that are never answered, dying slowly, quietly, convinced they don't matter anymore. But they do matter. They matter so much. And they deserve better than our excuses and our guilt and our promises to visit next month. The Ruth Callahan Project exists to make sure no one has to die wondering if their children remember them, to make sure no one spends their final days alone, to remind all of us that love is not something we fit into our schedules between meetings. Love is the schedule. Everything else is just the stuff we do in between. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces watching her, and felt Ruth's presence like a hand on her shoulder. "Love people while you still can," Lena said softly. "That's Ruth's message, that's her legacy. Don't wait for the perfect moment, don't wait for when things slow down, because the perfect moment is right now. The perfect moment is today. The perfect moment is whenever you still have the chance to pick up the phone, write the letter, make the visit, say the words, while you still can." The room erupted in applause, people rising to their feet. Lena stepped back from the podium, and Michael was there, pulling her into a hug. "She would be so proud," he whispered. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for listening," Lena whispered back, "for showing up when it mattered." Later that night, after the dinner ended and the guests went home, Lena and Michael drove to the cemetery where Ruth was buried. It was past midnight, but neither of them cared. They walked through the quiet grounds, past rows of headstones, until they reached Ruth's grave. Someone had left fresh flowers, white roses, Ruth's favorite. They stood there in the darkness, looking at the simple granite marker. "Ruth Marie Callahan, beloved mother she loved without condition." "I come here every week," Michael said quietly. "Every Sunday morning before church. I sit here and talk to her. Tell her about the foundation, about all the people we're helping, about how I finally understand what she was trying to teach me my whole life." "What was that?" Lena asked. "That love is the only thing that matters." Michael's voice was soft. "Success doesn't mean anything if you're alone. Money doesn't matter if you have no one to share it with. And all the achievements in the world can't make up for the time you didn't spend with the people who loved you." Lena thought about Ruth, sitting in that room writing letters that never got answered, waiting for a son who was too busy to come. And then she thought about those final weeks when Michael had shown up and stayed, when he'd held his mother's hand and listened to her stories and chosen her over his empire. "She got what she wanted in the end," Lena said. "She got you back, because of you." Michael said, "If you hadn't added that line to her letter, I'd still be in Chicago, still making excuses, still promising myself I'd visit next month, and she'd be gone, and I'd be living with that regret for the rest of my life." "But you're not," Lena said. "You showed up. You loved her while you still could." Michael nodded. "And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other people get that same chance, that other families don't make my mistakes." They stood there together in the quiet cemetery, two people connected by one woman's legacy and one letter that changed everything. "The foundation is going to keep growing," Michael said. "We're going to help thousands of people, tens of thousands eventually. And it's all because my mother taught me, in the very end, what really matters." Lena thought about Ruth's smile, about her gentle voice, about the way she'd apologized for existing even though she was the strongest person Lena had ever known. "Your mother was extraordinary," Lena said. "She was." Michael's voice was full of love and grief and gratitude, "And I'm going to make sure the world knows it, that her story helps other people find their way home before it's too late." They said quiet goodbyes to Ruth and walked back to their cars. But Lena knew this wasn't really goodbye. Ruth lived on in every letter the foundation helped write, in every family reunion they facilitated, in every person who learned to show up before it was too late. Ruth's legacy wasn't sadness or loneliness or waiting, it was love, pure, unconditional, patient love that asked for nothing but gave everything. The kind of love that changed people, the kind of love that saved lives. The kind of love that reminded all of us that in the end, when everything else falls away, the only thing that matters is whether we loved well and let ourselves be loved in return. And thanks to Ruth Callahan, thanks to one nurse who broke the rules, and thanks to one son who finally came home, thousands of people were learning that lesson. One letter at a time, one visit at a time, one moment of courage to say I love you while there was still someone there to hear it.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.